Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello everybody, this is Richard Harris with Karen Conrad here in the Truth and Liberty Coalition Studios for our Monday weekly live cast. And we are so thankful to have you with us tonight and so excited about the live cast tonight. Yes. We are going to have a real treat for you tonight. Our special guest is Pastor Kris Vallotton from Bethel out in Redding, California. And Kris, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to talking to your audience.
Yeah, and we're going to give you a proper introduction here in just a second. And we just want to welcome all our viewers tonight. And I'm going to turn it over now to Karen, and she's going to share some information with you about how you can participate in tonight's live cast and some important announcements about things that are coming up here at the ministry.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty live cast. We've got so much going on here at the ministry, and I'll tell you what, you just came back from the Values Voter Summit.
Yes, we did, and it was fantastic.
And Truth and Liberty was a sponsor.
Yeah, a co-sponsor with the Family Research Council.
It's great, and you did like 4 interviews, and it's really exciting. Truth and Liberty is really catching on, and we're so grateful for you as viewers and want to encourage you that if you're watching this, tonight's going to be an awesome program. Please share with your friends, call up your family, email, post on social media, and let people know to join us. Well, if you're watching on social media, Facebook, we're really excited about that, but we want to encourage you, as times we do get censored once in a while, is to join this live cast on truthandliberty.net. We've got it live on there, and we can assure you there's no interruptions. And just for taking a moment to talk about the Truth and Liberty website, too, we continue to have updates every week. Richard, you do such a great job just posting articles. I was kind of breezing through these. We have this big stack of information. And so if you want to know through a biblical view what is happening in the current events, check out truthandliberty.net. We've got some events coming up here at Andrew Wommack Ministries. One of them is on November 7th through the 9th, and it's Women Arise, and that has got Sue Sheriff and Dorothy Brown. They are our special guests. Then we've got Esther, Queen of Persia, which is an amazing musical from Elizabeth Mear, and we're so excited about that. The premiere is right here at Harris Bible College. And then we've got the Heart of Christmas coming up December 13th through the 15th. And you can register for those events at awmi.net/events. And one of the special things about Truth and Liberty is that we engage you as an audience. We love to have two-way communication, and we invite you to ask questions. And we answer as many of those as we can throughout the broadcast. And some that we miss, Richard, you do every Tuesday on Facebook.
Yes.
So if you are watching on truthandliberty.net or awmi.net, you can go ahead and ask those questions in the chat section. And if you're watching on social media, just put those comments and questions in the comment section. And we've got a whole team standing by, ready to get those questions and bring them forward to Richard and I for the broadcast tonight. Every week we have a giveaway, and it's very easy to qualify for that. Just simply subscribe at truthandliberty.net. And last week we had In God We Trust, the CD by Andrew. We want to congratulate Sharon Perry. Sharon, that CD is coming your way. Congratulations. And this week the product that we're giving away, one of my favorites, is A Better Way to Pray by Andrew Wommack. I'll tell you what, this rocked my world.
Yes, that book will change your life.
It absolutely will. Doesn't Andrew say, well, it might bless you, but it could make you really mad too, right?
Yes, it might make you mad.
Yeah, exactly. And also, Truth and Liberty, if this has been a blessing to you and you want to support us financially, we really welcome those donations. We are a 501c4 now. And you can give at truthandliberty.net, or you can call the phone line at 719-635-1111. And oftentimes we talk about some topics that people want some clarity on, or if you want to know more about the ministry, we've got prayer ministers and we've got customer service people there ready to answer all your questions. Again, that is 719-635-1111. All
Thanks,
right,
Karen.
Richard, are we ready to get started?
I'm ready. I'm excited about tonight. Well, folks, Kris Vallotton is the Senior Associate Leader at Bethel Church in Redding, California, and he's the co-founder of the now world-famous Bethel School of Ministry. And I have been hearing for years about things that are going on out at Bethel. I've never been there myself, but it sounds like the book of Acts going on out there. And man, you guys are making a huge impact, Kris. I just want to thank you again for joining us tonight. And let me just ask you right off the top here, what is it exactly that you do at Bethel out there in Redding?
Well, my job's so secret, I'd have to kill you if I told you about it.
Well, I'm glad you're remote then.
I'm kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. I oversee this school of ministry, as you said, co-founded it with my wife and Bill Johnson, and we have 2,500 students there, so that keeps me pretty busy. Yeah, and I also oversee most all the business world at Bethel Church, Bethel Enterprises, and I think 7 corporations we have. So that keeps me pretty busy. So yeah, and I sort of also preach on the weekends and help oversee our 800 employees. So.
Well, yeah, you've got a powerful ministry of the Word in your own right, and I know a lot of people are greatly blessed to hear you. And I understand you've got a new book that's out or coming out. And yes. What's that book all about?
It's called Poverty, Riches, and Wealth, and it's actually about poverty, riches, and wealth. Not very often that the title actually explains what's in the book, I guess, but it actually talks about the gospel, the kingdom, prosperity. And I think it's a great balance. I know lots of times people, they tend to accuse Bethel of being, of embracing the prosperity gospel. And I really think that this is a great balanced book that actually is about my life and about our lives, and talks a lot about how God views actual prosperity. So it's definitely not a book about poverty. It's definitely not a book about the prosperity gospel quote, but I think it's a great book, a great balanced approach to what does God think about wealth? What is kingdom wealth? And a lot of people, as you know, are rich, but they're not wealthy. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of people who are wealthy, but they aren't rich. And so we talk a lot about those kind of attitudes, and we talk a lot about what real prosperity is in the book.
That's awesome. And Kris, how can they find that book?
They can go on to krisvallotton.com, and they can find it right there. It's also on every major bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so forth.
Oh, that's great. I had the privilege of going out to Bethel for the first time. I think that was in May for the leadership conference, and I got to meet Kris. I'll tell you what, from the moment that we landed in Redding, went to the hotel, went to restaurants, it was like we could totally feel the difference that Bethel has made in that community. And I would say, Kris, if any ministry has transformed culture in their community, Bethel has to be right at the top of that list.
Well, we're proactively working at it. I don't know if we transformed it, but we've definitely influenced it. That's for sure.
Wow. Well, so I'm going to piggyback on that. I looked at your website, Kris, and there's this message that comes up right on your homepage, and it just captivated my attention. It says, transform the world within you so you can transform and then it's like this cycling words that come through there. Transform the business, transform the culture, transform the people around you.
Yes.
I think that's an amazing statement and a fantastic theme. How is it that Bethel has been so successful at transforming the culture there in your community?
Well, I think if you grow the kingdom within you, the kingdom within you becomes the kingdom around you. And Jesus talked about, the Pharisees and religious people who they cleaned the outside of the cup, but they didn't clean the inside of the cup. So, one of our goals is that the kingdom that you would actually proactively grow the kingdom within you, and that eventually that the kingdom within you would become the kingdom around you, and the kingdom around you should better the world around you. So, one of our goals, Jesus said, "You are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden." We hear lots of people say things like, in the last days, the church will get brighter and brighter, and the world will get darker and darker. And yet Jesus said that the light is placed in the world. He didn't say you're the light of the church. He said you're the light of the world. So I think part of our challenge in transforming culture is there are a lot of Christians that don't actually believe they're supposed to transform culture.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus made it very clear that we are the light of the world. So if the world's getting darker and darker, that's not the world's fault. We're the ones that are the light on a hill, and we're the ones who are supposed to bring light to the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. And Kris, you are out in Redding, California.
Yes.
And a lot of us would look at that and just say, my goodness, why is Bethel in California with all the challenges there? But I just know from listening to you guys, you're very proactive in really influencing California with the people that are on your list. And can you you've got some tough issues out there. Can you kind of take us down the path of how you approach those in Bethel and how you help stand in the gap there to bring the truth of the word to government and other areas?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because Bethel's not what you'd call an activist movement. Like you would very rarely see us protesting anything. I can't remember the last time we protest anything. We have a gay bar in our community. We have Planned Parenthood in our community. Our style is much more to move in an honoring way and to influence culture from the inside out. And so, but recently, about a year ago, I think that you're referring to too, Karen, there was 3 bills that have come up in California Congress, and those bills were around transgenderism and actually making it legal to, in my mind, mutilate our children at the those bills were about a couple of things. One, they were around if a young boy thinks he's a girl or a young girl thinks she's a boy, it would become illegal to in any way advise them otherwise. All you could do is affirm their feelings. And so when we started thinking about like what's happening to California, we felt that we needed to do something. And it really is the first time that we actually in any way became activists. And we asked our people to call their congressmen or congresswomen, their representatives, I should say. And 2,500 people called in 3 days. It was from what we understand, it was the most calls that they've ever received in a day. And those bills were pulled. But what's happening in all over the world, but California is one of the leaders, in my mind, of some pretty perverse things. And I want to just be clear, like God allows people to sin, and He gives people permission to sin. He's the one who planted 2 trees in the garden. And oftentimes Christianity, religion cuts down the second tree and calls it sanctification. And I think that God gives people permission to sin. So the question is, like, when do we step in and say enough? And I think that it is our privilege and our responsibility to protect children, the unborn, and those who are not ready to make those decisions for themselves. And so we actually had to make a decision to do something that really isn't our culture. We, as I said, we're not activists. We're not Elijah. We're not Elisha. We're more like Daniel and Joseph, like just helping to influence government for good.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kris, I look at cultural engagement by the church as actually part and parcel of the Great Commission. And I don't think that we can be effective actually at making disciples of nations without cultural engagement. I'm curious, how do you see that issue? Is that because a lot of pastors today say, well, the church doesn't have any role in politics, we shouldn't get involved in politics. That's politics, that's not religion. Of course, cultural engagement is bigger than just politics, but can you comment on that mindset, and how do you look at that?
Well, I can a lot. First of all, the idea of separation of church and state isn't in our Constitution. It's in no legal document, as you well know. It was a part of a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote in response to a friend. So that the idea that there is separation of church and state in our country, and that statement that gets repeated over and over, is actually not true. But I will say this, that oftentimes when Christians get involved in politics or in influencing their city, I often think that they're trying to Christianize their city instead of kingdomize their city. And I think that's a real problem. And I think it's one of the reasons why, unbelievers or non-believers or people from other religions think, well, we don't want Christians. We definitely don't want Christians to be involved, because those Christians will, they will try to make us all Christians. They'll be like Constantine. And I think, in my mind, Constantine was a failed experiment. So I think that so much has to do with how we approach our city. And I think that, for instance, if you vote your mayor in and you want your mayor to, Christianize your city, and he or she, it favors Christians, I think that Proverbs talks about an unfair balance. And I think that if you're a mayor, you shouldn't treat the Buddhist, the atheist, the Mormon, the Jehovah's Witness, or anyone else, any other religious or non-religious people, any different than you treat the Christian. I think that you're representing all the people. And I think oftentimes we vote somebody in that has our values, and we expect them to pastor a city instead of lead a city. And so, and I understand there's, that statement just created tons of controversy, but I do think it's important that we learn the difference between kingdomizing and Christianizing a city.
So just to follow up on that, what does it mean in your mind to kingdomize a city?
Well, I think that when we live for the benefit of all the people, when our life benefits everyone, I think that when we think like that, then I think that we're helping to kingdomize a city. I think that when we live to promote Christianity, and when we think that our mayor should show favoritism towards one religion, I think that that's obviously fine if you're a pastor, but if you're the mayor, you have to represent all the people. And you have to represent all the people in an honorable and godly way. And so I think the idea of Christianizing people is that you're trying to, basically, as I said, you're trying to make everybody your same religion. And I do understand that that there is some validity to wanting everyone to love Jesus, but I think we have to be careful what we do when we're political, from a political party. I wrote a few things. Christianizing is the goal. Christianizing a city, the goal is to convert the city to Christianity, favors Christians above other constituents, works to impose biblical laws on society, makes sin illegal, uses government office to impose Christianity on society wherever possible, removes personal choice whenever freedom is unrighteous, wants Christianity to be taught everywhere, and I think kingdomizing is the goal of kingdomizing a city is the goal is for everyone to experience the benefits of a superior kingdom, no matter their spiritual condition, represents everyone honorably, works to impose just laws that ensure freedom for all, providing a person's personal freedom doesn't harm another one's, uses government office to help society prosper and to live in peace, respects the right of people to choose sin for themselves as God does, as God allows them to, and wants the public school system to be free of religious and secular values. I think these are things that they don't sound right until you think through them.
Well, did you just say that our public schools? I don't think I heard you right. That our public schools should be free of religious values.
Well, I don't mean it like that. Here, let me put it like this. If you want religion to be taught in the public school, what religion do you want to be taught? You want the Baptist religion to be taught, or you want the Protestant religion to be taught? You want do you want the Satanists to teach? Do you want the Mormons to teach? Do you want Jehovah's Witnesses to teach? And my point is that the challenge in my mind in Christian schools is that humanism has not been slated as a religion, and therefore our schools are not they're not culturally free of religion, because humanism and atheism is also religion, and it's been taught in our public school systems where where God's values are not allowed to be taught, but humanism is taught every day in our school.
Well, so I was a couple months ago. I was looking at some statistics.
Yeah.
The Pew Research Center does periodically. They do a survey on religion in America, and if you compare the data, and this is backed up not just by Pew but by several sources, that the Christian faith is generally in decline in America. Unfortunately, the number of people that identify as Christians, the number of people that will say that they believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, and many other similar types of questions has been declining since, like in the 1990s, the percentage of people that identify as Christians was, 80%. And in the 2010s, now it's down to the low 70s. So at that rate, we'll be Christian faith will be a minority in this country before long. So I ask the question, Kris, are we doing this Great Commission right? If we were, it would seem maybe we could say this shouldn't be happening. And since it is happening, what are we doing wrong? Is the church actually following a biblical model by and large in how we carry out the Great Commission today?
Well, okay. Let me say it this way. I did a study on American cities, and here's what I learned. The cities that had the greatest Christian church-going population had the worst social statistics in America. In other words, let me say it really clearly. There was 5 cities that were exceptions that we found. But when you study American cities, the cities that have the greatest Christian church-going population percentage-wise have the worst social statistics. In other words, the more people that go to a Christian church, the more poverty rises, crime rises, divorce rises, even sickness rises. The question is, if we're supposed to be the light of the world, it seems to me that what we're doing is we're glowing in our churches, so to speak, while the world goes to hell, and then we create eschatologies to make it okay. And we're like, yeah, the world's got to get worse until Jesus comes back. And I'm like, part of the challenge is that our eschatology is messed up, because I don't think that we are even close to discipling nations when we huddle in a church and let the world go to hell. So in my mind, part of the challenge is that Christians aren't actually benefiting their city. And if you're not benefiting your city, Jesus said, you're the light of the world, a city set on a hill that can't be hidden. The next verse, do your good works in such a way that people see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So Jesus ties good works directly to light. And my point would be, what kind of good works are we doing that are actually people are seeing our good works and go, there must be a God? And as you know, Solomon was known for his great wisdom, and the Queen of Sheba came to see Solomon, and what she saw was great works. She saw the way the tables were set, the way his waiters were dressed. And it goes on to say very practical things like the wisdom from another age was demonstrated in practical ways in the life of Solomon. And I think that part of the challenge that we have is that Christians throw rocks at everything that's wrong but they actually don't bring any benefit to their city. We have tax-free land. We protest everything that people do that's wrong, and we wonder why people don't want us to lead and rule and influence them. And so I think there's got to be another approach, and we're trying very hard to have another approach to our city.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm just going to speak from my observation and kind of ask you, what you see. It seems to me that by and large, pastors in the American church now, they view their job, their role as really as almost evangelistic, many of them. Hey, invite your people to church and we'll give an altar call.
Yeah.
And they confine their teaching and their preaching to, 5 steps for spiritual growth on this issue or that issue. But the pastors are not leading their congregation to become equipped to actually go out and be the Daniels, the Shadrach, Meshachs, the Abednegos, the culture influencers and changers. And you mentioned the transgenderism a little bit ago.
Yeah.
How many pastors today are talking about that issue in their churches with any degree of substance other than the Bible condemns it? I mean, you know what I'm saying? And
I do.
Can you comment on that?
Well, here's some things that I think about that. Jesus said, "I will build the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." 127 times in different ways, he said, "You extend the kingdom." The challenge is we spend all our time building the church and wonder who's extending the kingdom. And part of the challenge is that we think the church is the kingdom. And I propose that all of the church is in the kingdom, but not all the kingdom's in the church. And therefore, 80% of all the miracles done in the Bible were done in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And, we say, if you want to get healed, come to church. You want to get saved, come to church. You want to learn about prosperity and how to prosper your family, your city, come to church. And I'm like, I think it's more like Ezekiel's river. You notice that in the metaphor of Ezekiel's river, the further you got from the sanctuary, the deeper the river got. And the point would be that the greatest miracles are the furthest from the church. And I don't mean that they're not coming from the church. I mean that I think that God wants to equip all of his people, not the pastors, not the apostles and prophets and whatever you believe in the fivefold ministry. But I think that those apostles and prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers equip the saints to do the work of service. Mm-hmm. And part of that should be that we benefit our city, that we actually help our city actually prosper. Mm-hmm. And if we're not helping our city to prosper, there's no possible way we're ever going to make disciples of nations. Yeah. It's a joke. And if people think discipling nations is just leading people to Christ, I don't mean just, like, of course people need Jesus. But I think that it's broader than that. I think we can't just make disciples in nations. I think we need to make disciples of nations.
That's really good. And Kris, that's so, Andrew's approach here with Charis Bible College is so similar to that. We've got a business school, we've got a practical government school, we've got a mission school, we've got music, creative arts, really across pretty much the 7 mountains.
Exactly. And so beautiful.
It is, and it's like so similar to what you're seeing at Bethel, because when people come here, like I was teaching in the business school today, and these people, obviously are on fire for the Lord, but have an understanding, like I need to take what I learn here and go out, because the community is not all coming into a church. Some people would never go into a church. We're the Jesus that goes out, and we're able to affect the marketplace in all these areas. That's right. And, I really am so excited about that. And I know, like, even at Bethel, you guys have this amazing School of Technology is maybe what it's called, where you're equipping people, and they're getting hired to go into places like Google. And, it's like these people are getting loaded up at Bethel, and they're going out into these places. And that is how we're transforming the communities and our states and our nations.
Yeah, that's great.
We call it coding with a cause. We're teaching them coding,
yes,
that's great.
But we're also teaching them about nobility and honor and loyalty And what's happening is, we're hearing from all of these great companies, they're like, well, we can get people to code. That's not a problem. But we have a hard time hiring people that have great character. And so we're teaching we want to have the wisdom of Daniel, but we want the character of Daniel and Joseph and Esther and these great people in the Bible. So, yeah. Hey, I just want to make a clarifying point you didn't ask. You asked me a question, and I think that I was a misunderstanding when we were talking about school system. I definitely want kingdom principles taught in the school system. I was simply talking about religion itself. I think that that's a different subject. So I just want to clarify.
Yeah, that's an important distinction for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I was teaching today at Harris, and I was telling, it was a course called Original Intent, and I was telling the students, this concept that we have in our modern culture of secular versus sacred is not a concept that you find in the New Covenant.
No.
It's an Old Covenant concept, but it is not in the New Covenant. All things in the New Covenant are lawful to me, and all things are sacred to God. He owns it all, and we are called by God to take His presence and His Word and be His living epistles everywhere. And, I don't know what it seems like people maybe are starting to wake up to this and shake off these shackles that have been on us for so long. But what do you think about that, Kris?
Well, the very first message that Bill Johnson ever preached in our little church when he became our pastor 41 years ago, he taught us Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And he said, most people have this list, like, first I seek the kingdom, then I seek, like my family, and then my ministry, and then my work. And Bill said, listen, there is no second. If it's not in the kingdom, you shouldn't be doing it. And just what you were saying, Richard,
awesome.
He shared that once I receive Jesus, everything I do is sacred.
Yeah.
In Romans chapter 12, as you know, offer your body as a living sacrifice. Offer your body as a living sacrifice, your spiritual service of worship. And he said, at the time I had an auto repair shop, and he made this statement. He said, what that worship leader does on the guitar, what that guitar is to that worship leader, Chris's wrenches are to Kris leading worship, because when he devoted himself to God, when he works on cars, his work is worship to God. Yeah. And what he did in one message is he pulled my business into the kingdom. And suddenly I wasn't a Christian who was doing business. I had a kingdom business in which people could experience the kingdom when they walked into the doors of my business the same way they could when they walked into the doors of the church.
Wow, it's
so
awesome.
true. Last night I was driving up the hill from Denver, and I was stopping at a store. I was picking up a few things, and I walked in, and there was 2 people working there. It was kind of late, so it was quiet. And I just asked for help, and they were so helpful and kind. And I was like, wow, this is like, what a great atmosphere in here. Well, then I started to go around to the counter, and they're like, hey, I watch you on YouTube or whatever. And I was like, these are Harris students.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was when I walked in there, I felt it,
right.
Okay? Yeah. So I'm going in, imagine what the community feels when Harris students like that, they walk into that store.
Right.
Those people may not come out to Harris, but they're going to experience the kingdom that is being taught here through that. And then my son has been going to Redding to do some work, and he was telling his coworkers about Redding and Bethel, and they wouldn't believe. They're like, no, I don't believe it, because he was saying about how you paid to have a flight, from Los Angeles and things to come to Redding, and those flights are full. So he's like, I'm going to prove it to you. So they went up to a car rental, and he just asked lady, so, tell us, what's the main influence here in Redding? Why is the airplane full coming to Redding? And the girl at the counter is like, oh, it's this church. It's Bethel.
Yeah.
And these guys, they're not Christians. And they're like, oh my goodness. And then all the time as they were in that community, there were Bethel people waiting on them at the exercise place, at the hotel. And so that really has an impact, and we're doing something similar here.
Yeah,
it's so exciting.
One of the things, you remember what I said to you a few minutes ago about the book I wrote and the the research we did on American cities. Mm-hmm. And the more Christians that went to, the more people that went to a Christian church, the worse off the community was. Well, that's in a book called Heavy Rain that I wrote several years ago. And I was going to do this, I was going to share this message called Apostolic People Transform Cities. And that day I had this whole message about how God's people should positively affect a city. And I had done the statistics already, done the research. And so I was coming to work, and the newspaper was at my front door. So I just picked it up and I threw it in the car. And as I'm driving to work to Sunday morning to preach, the front page of the newspaper opens, and it rolls out to the front page of the newspaper. And the front page article in the whole front page was Redding, California, one of the worst cities in America to live in. And at the time, our church was around 7,000 people in a city of 98,000 people. And I was going to talk about that Sunday how Bethel is transforming Redding, and yet the social statistics and the way they measure the health of a city, 10 community health indicators. Our city was one of the worst cities in America to live in a city 100,000 or less. So I read that article to our church, and I asked them the question: is this our problem? Or is the fact that it's not our problem the problem? And I took that same letter to our senior leadership team on Tuesday, and I read the article that basically said Redding, California is one of the worst cities in America to live in. And here we are, 7,000 people come to our church on the weekend, and our city is in dire straits. And I read that article, and I said, is this our problem, or the fact that it's not our problem the problem? And everyone on the leadership team said, wow, what should we do? And we started developing a strategy, like how do we actually help our city get well? And the first thing we did is we started tithing to our city. And then we started, helping, we put together a plan for 2,400 students to go to work in our city every week. And it's what's called city projects. And the civic auditorium was closing because it was going broke. And so we started a 501c3, a non-religious, nonprofit, public benefit corporation, and we took over the civic auditorium, still owned by our city, and we took over running it as a secular organization, and saved the city $2.4 million a year. And the connotation of that, or the experience that our city said, this is the best this civic's been run in 43 years. We gave $500,000 to our police officers 2 years ago because we raised $1.2 million total because 4 police officers were losing their jobs, and we already had a crime problem, and our city couldn't afford the officers. And so those are the things we've been doing, and lots more, but just to help our city. And not everyone loves us, for sure, but it's one thing for people to hate you for something you haven't done. It's another thing for them to hate you for things that you really have done. So,
wow, that's amazing. Is that whole kind of subject and journey, is that in a book somewhere? Have you written about all of that yet? And what book would that be?
It's called Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain.
Yeah.
All right. And
actually, the San Francisco Chronicle, which, as you know, is usually pretty liberal, actually did an entire article on Redding and Bethel, and I think it's in May, and it's called is this Redding, California? Is this Redding or is this heaven? I think that's the name of the article, something like that.
Wow,
but they actually did an entire article on it, and as very accurately depicted. I was very, very pleased.
Wow. I just want to share one little anecdote, and then we've got to get to some questions.
Yes.
But one of the people that we have come to teach in the Practical Government School here at Harris is named Bishop Joshua Loweri. And Bishop Joshua is from Uganda. I don't know if you know him, Kris, but he is such an amazing leader there in Uganda, and has been a primary leader in the revival that has overcome that country, transforming it from the days of Idi Amin and bloody tyranny to now one of the leading Christian nations in Africa. And I'll never forget that after one teaching session, we went to the lodge with our students and sat down and all had, Subway sandwiches or whatever. And he's talking to the students one-on-one, and he starts talking to one of our government students who feels called a pastor in a small New England state. And he says to him, when you get to the place where you think God is calling you, I want you to walk around the city and claim that city as you view yourself as the pastor, not just of your little church, but of the entire city. And everybody, believer and unbeliever alike, fall under your spiritual care and your spiritual authority. Yeah. And it sounds so basic now to me, but when I heard it, it just like blew my mind. I was like, this is transformational truth right here.
Yes.
And we don't think that way. We think of our little ministries and our little churches, and we don't realize the power and authority that we have as the ecclesia of God to actually transform the culture with God's kingdom.
Yeah.
So
that's really good.
Yeah.
That article in the San Francisco Chronicle was May 21st, 2019. And it's called, Is This Heaven or Reading? That's the name of the article.
Wow.
You can look it up.
That's amazing.
If you do read it, please give a positive comment on it, because we certainly want to tell the San Francisco Chronicle thank you for printing such a great article on us.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure we have a lot of questions coming in. This has been a fantastic conversation. Yeah. So let's take some questions from viewers.
All right. So our first question comes in from Charmaine, who's on chat. And she says, Kris, from your personal experience, what would you say to the leaders in our churches whose concern is to fill the members with more of a social club atmosphere rather than teaching believers to be true disciples of Jesus?
What was the last line? Rather than what?
I'll just back up here. What would you say to the leaders in our churches whose concern is to fill the members with more of a social club atmosphere rather than teaching believers to be true disciples of Jesus?
Yeah, I think she probably answered the question by the way she asked the question. I think that pastors are largely intimidated by culture. Mm-hmm. And the deal is that if Jesus said, Isaiah 60 says, "Arise and shine." It doesn't say "Arise and reflect." And the challenge is that if we don't become the leaders of culture, and if we don't become the cultural architects in society, then someone else is actually shaping society. And then if the world is shaping society, then you have to reflect it just so you can be relevant. So I think it's important to rise and shine, not rise and reflect. And the only way to stay relevant is either to lead or to reflect it. And I think that lots of pastors are afraid to lead, so they reflect culture so they're not irrelevant.
Very good. Okay, this comes in from Cynthia on chat, and she says, Kris, please share how God has led you to such blessings. She said it would be awesome to hear his direction that he's giving you in your church to have such an impact.
Well, I don't think there's a magic pill. I think that discipleship is a long, persevering process. I think it's a whole lot like Luke 18, the judge and the widow. I think that people want an instant cure, and we've been working in our city now. This is our 19th year, going on our 20th year of actually proactively giving and working in our city. And to tell you the truth, it's only been the last 2.5 or 3 years that the social statistics in our city are starting to dramatically change. Crime is dropping now. Our economy is dramatically improving. The health of our city is dramatically improving. But it was 17 years of just working without seeing any noticeable change in our social statistics. And as I was saying, there are 10 social indicators that you can find online in which they measure the health of our city. And it's pretty when you're working hard in your city to see your city improve, and you don't see anything happen for 17 years, it can be discouraging. But it takes time to create a new ecosystem and to bring prosperity and the positive nature of the kingdom to bear on your city.
Wow.
You know, that's really encouraging actually for a lot of what you're doing and we're doing through Truth and Liberty, because sometimes we don't immediately see the change of the things that we know are right. But with that perseverance, that's really encouraging. Like, stay with it. You know, we've got movement going, and it took 17 years for you to change those statistics.
Yeah, that's right. What's the promise in Scripture? Well, you know, don't grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you shall reap if you faint not.
Yes.
It applies on a global scale too, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, if it was easy to transform a city, everyone would be doing it. It's not easy, you know, and by the way, it won't happen without a strategy. And we worked for 14 years, as I shared with you earlier, 14 years without any strategy, and nothing, literally, people changed, but our city overall as a culture didn't change. It wasn't until we sat down and started to develop a strategy, like until you actually look at the problems and ask yourself, why is crime high? Why are there no jobs? Why do people not want to move here? Why are people unhappy? Until you start doing the research, and we actually did a year's worth of research. We put a whole research team together and asked the hard questions, like what is driving each one of these 10 negative statistics? And and how can we turn it around? Anyway, yeah.
Well, fantastic.
I'm so passionate about it, I end up talking.
No, that's why you're here. We want to hear from you.
Like that.
So, and I don't want to cut off any questions, but I have a little bit of a follow-up. Has Bethel been proactive in bringing other community churches into that effort to transform the city, the community?
Well, I know the right answer to that, but I'll have to say that we have about 110 churches in our community, really good, most of them very good churches, but very, very few of the churches get involved with us in that area. And I'll tell you, it's been disheartening at times. And, you know, people say things like, well, when the church comes together in unity, then the city will change. And I'm like, wow. You know, Jesus couldn't get 12 disciples to get along. They still didn't get along after Jesus rose from the dead. So I'm like, I don't know if you want to wait for that, you know?
That's a great question.
Sorry, I know that's not the answer.
No, it's an honest answer, and I only raise it because I understand that this is a problem. How much even more effective would we be if the pastors would come together and operate as? I was talking to a guy. I'm robbing people of their question time, but at the Values Voter Summit in Washington, I met a pastor or ran into a pastor that I know who is leading an organization that he has started in the state of Oklahoma, where they are going in county by county and recruiting councils of pastors and civic leaders to serve together, and not paid by the government, totally volunteer, but they are taking spiritual responsibility for their cities, addressing all these issues that you're talking about, and they're beginning to see some real progress. And I think there's something to that, you know?
I do too.
Yeah, me too.
Sort of a follow-up to your comments here too. Leslie M. on chat, she asked this: what do you mean by a new ecosystem?
Well, you know, everything operates on an ecosystem. So, you know, for instance, just think about a personal ecosystem. It's like I have something, I have a struggle with depression because something went bad. And so something goes bad, and I start to say, well, gosh, you know, I must not be a good person. And so because I think I'm not a good person, then I come over here and something goes wrong, and I create this whole ecosystem like a hamster wheel I can't get off it. And everything that operates systemically, everything that operates from, you know, a tree that grows to the way people live, if it's sustainable, it has an ecosystem. So evil has an ecosystem, and righteousness has an ecosystem, and poverty has an ecosystem. And for example, lots of the times the way that we try to help people in poverty actually funds poverty. For example, when you feed the poor, and I'm not talking about the mentally ill, but when you feed the poor and you give them no responsibility for the benefits that you give them, and you give them no accountability, then you're actually funding the very ecosystem that you're trying to break. Because poverty poverty is an ecosystem. Somebody once said, if you don't have money, don't ask for money, ask why you don't have money. I don't think that's always true. But if you've grown up in 3 decades or 3 generations of poverty, there's probably an ecosystem that needs to be broken, not just let's make some money.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right, so we've got, this person is guest 2830 on chat, and she says, would you please speak to women inside and outside the church and how women inside the church can navigate godliness rather than feminism that's been recently expressed?
Well, I wrote a book called Fashion to Reign. I keep promoting all my books here. I'm sorry. I wrote a book called Fashion to Reign, empowering women in their divine call. And I believe that women are equally powerful and distinctly different. And I think that religion has been used to reduce women for thousands of years. And it seems funny to me that every religion in every culture, in every country, has figured out some way to make women less powerful. And I think that the church should be the most empowering culture in the history of the world. And I think we should empower everybody to their full potential, and that includes women. And I believe that women, as I said, are equally powerful. I think when Jesus, when God said, let's make man in our image, and he made them male and female, and in the image of God he made them, it takes a male and a female to demonstrate the nature of God. And if you impress women, you lose half the revelation of the nature of God, because God is not a man. He's both male and female. Remember, it took a male and female to actually demonstrate the image and likeness of God.
That's really good.
So Kris, let me follow up on that. So today in our culture, the message is it's kind of contradictory, right? On the one hand, they're saying there's no difference between men and women, and don't talk about any differences at all. But on the other hand, they're saying I have a right to be a woman even if I'm a man. Well, if there's no distinction, then who cares? But how should...
That's a pretty good point, Richard.
How?
It's like genderless society, but I'm a man who thinks he's a woman.
Yeah, don't offend me by using the wrong pronoun, but don't talk about any differences either. So how can men and women in this culture articulate the differences between men and women in a way that honors women, and that doesn't come across as toxic masculinity or whatever the latest label is?
I'm going to make a statement that I might be sorry for later.
Okay, let me get my pen ready.
If men were oppressed as women have been for thousands of years, we wouldn't have a feminist type movement for men, a masculinist movement, or whatever you want to call it. We would have houses burnt down, countries at war. I mean, men would not let women reduce them. So in my mind, you asked a question about the feminist movement. I think the feminist movement is a response to being oppressed. Is it the right response? Well, no, it's not the right response in my mind. But if men were treated the same way, the response would be 100 times more violent.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, so here is a question.
You might want to edit that out.
No, there's no editing on Truth and Liberty.
Okay, this is a question that came in from guest 3215, and her question is, what has God shown you for the future of California and America?
Good question.
Well, I believe that nothing's impossible with God. And,
Amen.
Paul makes it very clear that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. Therefore, the cities that have the greatest sin, and from our perspective, have the greatest anticipation of grace being extended to them. And so I think that California is an apostolic city in that it's called to shape culture. And if you look at the greatest revivals in modern history, most of them in America, most of them have come from California. And you have the Jesus movement from California. You have the Foursquare movement from California. You have the Vineyard movement from California. You have the whole Pentecostal movement from the Azusa Street movement from California. And I think that, when people say, what good can come out of California? I'm like, I don't know if you want to ask that question again, because most every movement that's been a national movement in America has been spawned out of California. And, we have San Francisco, the city of St. Francis. We have Los Angeles, the city of angels. And I actually believe that California is going to shift. And it may not shift next week or next year, but over the next 20 years, there's going to be a dramatic shift. And we are going to be leading the nation in kingdom values.
Amen. I'll agree with that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Kris, that's awesome. Okay, so this is from Ruthie on chat, and she says, Kris, why are so many pastors afraid of speaking on cultural issues in the church? Is it because they're afraid of losing members or money because they may offend someone? How do we encourage our local churches to speak truth?
Well, that depends on what you call truth. I have a lot of empathy for pastors. Obviously, I'm sort of a pastor myself, and the average pastor is pastoring 70 people. And I think that most pastors in those small churches, they're just doing one heck of a job. And pastoring is a very difficult job. So I don't want to dish on pastors, but I'll say this, that especially around the LGBTQ gay issues, there's a book called After the Ball, which was written about the gay strategy. I think it was written in the 80s, around the strategy to actually make gay and the gay movement normalize, if you will, sexual sin, and make the gay movement acceptable to culture. And in that book, they outline some of the fantastic strategies that they're using right now, and that is, things like you have two choices. You can be pro-gay, or you can be a hater. Those are your two choices. And it was a very powerful strategy that they used. And now Christians have picked that up, and they're like, I don't want to be a hater. I love people. And there's no such thing in our culture now, at least in most of mainline California, of being a disagreeer. You can't be a disagreeer, you're a hater. And so I think that, that strategy has worked so well that churches have redefined love to mean acceptance. Like, we accept your behavior, we accept you no matter how how you live. And I would propose that we do accept you, but we don't accept your lifestyle, or our lifestyle, any lifestyle that isn't whole and healthy. The prodigal son story, which I told this weekend, is a great illustration that the father did not go out to the pig farm to encourage the boy to come home. He waited till the boy repented. And when he repented, and the father didn't turn the farm into a brothel to encourage the boy to come home. The young man knew that he had to repent of his sins to actually live in the Father's farm.
Awesome.
And I think that sometimes we think the goal of God is to get people in the building,
Kris,
instead of actually.
I hate to interrupt you, brother. This has been so amazing, but we only have 45 seconds left, so
All right.
we have to wrap this up, unfortunately, but it's been such an honor to have you, and what
Thank
an
you very
amazing
much.
discussion. I think we could take any number of these things and go off and talk about them for an hour or two. But folks, thank you to all of our viewers for watching tonight, and you can watch past episodes that are archived on Truth and Liberty, and check out our resources and our 24/7 news feed. Be sure to join us next week here on truthandliberty.net, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern, for our Monday night live cast. And Karen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
having me. It
having
has
me.
been fantastic, and we look forward to seeing everybody again next week here on truthandliberty.net.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net or by calling our phone center at 719-635-1111. Our prayer ministers are there to help you with your donations and to pray with you.